Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 11th installment of our student admission program virtual panels. I'm your host, Chris O'Brien. I'm Associate Director of Admissions and advisor to the student admissions program. And usually I'd be the one that would welcome you to campus for an information session or question and answer session. And I certainly wish that the five of us and all of you viewers were with all of it in the same room on campus, enjoying each other's company. Unfortunately, that can't happen. But what can be really normal in this very uncertain time is talking about college, because college will be in all of your futures, and it's important to talk about the things that will be in your future, and if it's Boston College, what your life would be like. The panel tonight was assembled with STEM in mind. Many of you viewers are anticipating a college career that will involve the study of neuroscience, the study of biology, the study of chemistry, and maybe a future graduate school, medical school, or a career in the sciences. So we thought we'd devote tonight to some students that have made their academic life at Boston College, and maybe some of their other choices around STEM and the study of STEM at Boston College. So what I'm gonna ask the panel to do is, and thank you guys for your time tonight, we really appreciate it, is to introduce yourself. And an introduction will be who you are, the Boston accent, if you can pull it off, would be a plus, who you are, where you're from, what year you are, and what particular major, minor program you are. And then we'll have all four of you introduce yourself, and I'll ask a few questions that I've come up with, but I've also, any of you viewers out there are welcome to join us with questions as well. So you can use the question and answer tab on Zoom here, and you can send us questions and we'll try to cover them tonight. Okay, so it's always best, so you don't talk over each other, to go in alphabetical order of your first name. So if you take a second, you're BC students, so you're wicked, wicked smart. Take a second, figure out who that is, and commence with the introductions.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Danielle Rinaldi. I'm a junior in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, and my majors and minors are a bit of a mouthful, so bear with me. I'm a double major in biology and philosophy with a minor in global public health and the common good. I'm also on the PreMed track here at BC.
That's perfect.
We're not doing a little experience.
Perfect. That's perfect.
I digress.
We have 45 minutes to talk about experiences. Don't do it all at the beginning, Danielle. It gives me nothing to ask.
All right.
Perfect. Okay, who's next?
Hello, everybody. My name is Joseph, or most of my friends call me Jake Alfanato. I'm a senior biochemistry major here at BC, and I also completed the pre-med track too.
Excellent.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Peralt. I'm a junior in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences. I'm a biochemistry major with double minors in bioinformatics and global public health and the common good. And I'm also on the pre-medical track.
And Laura, where are you from?
I'm from Salem, New Hampshire.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shayna. I'm a sophomore in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences studying neuroscience, and I'm from New Jersey, and I'm not on the pre-med track.
Let's make that clear. Excellent. All right. So first things first, let's go back to when you were looking at colleges. How particular were your questions in terms of your major? What kind of questions, and you don't necessarily have to answer them because we'll answer them in the midst of our program already, but what would you be asking if you were a senior in high school with the interest that you have, that are important things to know before you chose the college that you did?
Are we still going in alphabetical order?
No, Danielle, you could just, whoever's the quickest one with an answer can start.
Yeah, so for me, when I was thinking about it, I came in wanting to be a biochemistry major because I had studied math and science pretty heavily with like AP courses in high school. So it seemed pretty natural to me to want to come into BC as a biochemistry major. But when I was thinking about my choices that I had in front of me, like I had said, it was choices and options that I able to explore a lot of different things. And I think that's one of the awesome parts about BC is that we have a pretty wide core curriculum that all students participate in, as well as the opportunity to try new things in different departments too.
Okay, that's a good example. How about someone else? You come in, you want to study the sciences. What are the most important questions a student who is coming to study the sciences in a college should ask?
So I would echo first what Jake said. You know, I think it's important to look at, if you know you want to go into STEM, of course, you can ask those questions, but also look overall at a school. But particularly for STEM, what I looked at was research. I knew coming in that BC was a top research institution. So making sure I asked, what kind of research goes on here? Is it easy to get involved early on as a freshman? Those kind of questions, because that is pivotal to being a STEM major, is getting involved in that way on campus.
So let's start, you roll into these intro courses as a freshman, which are a little bit larger and maybe supposedly intimidating. You hear the horror stories from the outside looking in about how these courses are meant to sort out the people that are serious and not serious. Talk about some of your first classroom experiences in the sciences. Were they really intimidating, or did you find that they were the reverse? Did you find that they were very welcoming and trying to get to the heart of what you wanted to get out of the course?
Go ahead, Shana.
So for me, it was kind of a mix because I wasn't used to the lecture style classes, obviously, as a freshman. On one hand, with BC does with these like big lecture sciences is that once a week you have smaller discussions that's led by a TA. So you can ask your questions then, have that one-on-one interaction in small classes of maybe like 20 students max. So that was super helpful. One of my scarier experiences was in like an intro level biology course. My professor was he normally taught higher level biology courses, and this was his first time teaching this course. So he used to speed through the lectures. It was supposed to be an hour 15, but we got out literally after 30 minutes every single day because he just talked at the speed of light, and it was so intimidating, and no freshman wanted to tell him to slow down. But I think eventually one of us spoke up and he understood, and he was totally nice about it. He also recorded his lectures so we could go back and watch them. But then he like made sure to slow down. He kind of forced us to ask questions because it can be intimidating. So I think a lot of the professors are aware that they're teaching these large classes where students can feel overwhelmed, but it was nice to have a professor recognize that and like do something without us having to feel scared or embarrassed to speak up.
Yeah, I'd love to jump off of what Shana's talking about with professors. Actually, one of the questions that I asked a lot of schools that I was looking at were, is it possible to know my professors, especially if the school has larger lecture style classes? And that was something that kind of intimidated me about BC because it was one of the larger schools I applied to. And I just have to say that in my intro level classes, especially freshman year, my professors made a really significant effort to get to know their students. Actually, one of my most favorite professors at BC is the late Neil Wolfman, who was famous for knowing every student in his 200 student lecture by like the second week of school. And so I think Professor Wolfman is a great example of what a lot of professors here at BC like to do with their students, especially in those larger freshman seminars with intro level science courses.
Jake, you were the one that talked about AP classes. And I noticed that a lot of people take AP Chem, AP Bio, some AP Physics. How much crossover was there from AP study, AP classes to what the first month, 2 months might have been in your first science class at BC?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of at least probably the two most common are AP Biology and AP Chemistry. Perhaps that's a little bit presumptuous of me. And so I think that, as far as AP Biology goes, that's like a really good foundational course. So for those of you that have like your AP exams in like a month, I wouldn't push that off. For me, in the position that I'm in, I actually kind of skipped over the typical like freshman entry level biology lecture series and kind of started right on like the sophomore track. And then as far as chemistry goes, what, me getting a high score on the AP chemistry exam allowed me to do is participate in the honors chemistry section. And so like, again, it kind of eliminated that redundancy in terms of, they assume that you're coming in with a pretty decent working knowledge of what's taught in the typical course. So, they kind of pick up the pace in the first semester and then skip right into that terrifying course of organic chemistry that, is like has some pretty nasty rumors surrounding it. And to kind of address both two questions that I see in the Q&A, and something that Chris had said earlier was that I think pre-med classes do have like an unfortunate representation about like this weed out culture. But I think, what's a big adjustment for people coming into BC is really just kind of the level that the classes are taught at and the quality of the faculty. I don't think I've had a professor here that didn't get their PhD from Harvard, MIT, or Caltech, and those are all really great research schools. And so they're definitely teaching at a really high level and expect you to rise to that. And that said, as part of the honors chemistry program with research opportunities at BC, it was a smaller class section. I think, it was a 4-semester program, and by the end there was like 11 or 12 of us in it. And so every person who was in the class as part of the program participated in a semester's worth of research in a professor's lab rather than doing the traditional organic chemistry lab. And I think I learned like more chemistry in those 5-6 months than, I had probably would have been able to learn in a classroom in a whole semester.
Right. And I know a lot of the work that you do translates to hands-on lab work better than, especially talking about the intro class and some of the big lectures. Shana, you talked about lecture halls. I mean, what was the typical size of your first science class at BC?
I'm kind of ballparking, but I want to say like my general chemistry class was maybe 130. It's somewhere in like the mid 100s. But then as you go up higher, obviously the classes get smaller as you become more major specific. Now my classes are about 20 students, all of my classes, yeah.
Would you guys consider, again, just from the outside looking in, did you feel competitive with classmates, or was it more collaborative with classmates? Sometimes, if you don't think, if the class is graded on a curve, or you only think there's so many A's to go around, that could be an atmosphere where you're not very collaborative and much more competitive. What was your experience in all of your classes in terms of how you related to peers, study groups, working with them, or did you feel a competition with them?
Go ahead, Laura.
I would say that with being in a big lecture like that, getting over that hump of thinking that you're competing with everyone is the most important thing of being a STEM major. You start off thinking you're all in the same boat, everyone around you is just as smart as you, and so they're your competition. And once you kind of leave that behind you and realize that these students are assets to you actually doing better in your classes and going to study groups and hanging out after maybe a discussion session to go over some material, I think that's the most important part that you need to get over as a freshman, because it can be intimidating if you let that competitive nature that you might have had in high school kind of like dictate where you go in college. So I would say that also was better about having bigger lectures as a freshman, because teachers weren't like asking for more collaboration in class. So you were able to kind of relax in class, take your notes, and then afterwards, ask those questions one-on-one. And then as you move up in your classes and they get more specific, you feel more comfortable participating in a smaller class.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so to kind of go off of that, I came into college from a super competitive high school. So I was so scared. I was like, if high school was so competitive, I can't even imagine what college is going to be like, especially since, as Laura said, everyone is coming from that type of like mentality. Like we're all academics in that sense. But I actually found out to be the opposite. All of my classes were very collaborative environments, especially those intro level classes. The discussion with TAs to answer one of the questions, they supplement professor office hours. So your professor will have office hours, and then you also have the weekly discussion. And if you can't make your professor's office hours, you literally just send them an email and they'll find some time to meet with you. Especially during when we're all at home now. I've been to Zoom office hours with my professors too. They're very accommodating. And yeah, I found the opposite environment. It was very collaborative. Study groups are a must. You like make your best friend on the 3rd floor of the library. You have these like big tables and you all study together. So yeah, I would not say that those big classes are like kill or be killed. It's a very collaborative environment.
Jake, you want to add anything real quick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and kind of like I talked about earlier, is it's just this whole adjusting process in your first semester. Pretty much all the kids that come here to BC were at like the top of their high school class, and then like you put all of you really smart people together in a room, and like half of you by definition are like average or less. And so like it's more about like not thinking about it that way and realizing that you're with a bunch of smart people like yourself. And one of the best ways that I always learned was, again, in those discussion sections we had for the classes, that the TA or the professor would put a problem on the board, and all 15 of us would sit there and struggle through it for a whole half hour, just like, and that's really the best way to learn, is people pitching out ideas and explaining it to their classmates and having a discussion in that way.
A question came in, and obviously we were going to talk about it. Jake, you brought it up, and I think all of you have had some experience just in terms of research opportunities. Maybe from a general point, just to how how many are floating around, how students get involved in it, and maybe if you guys can talk a little bit about what opportunities have presented themselves to you.
So I can jump off on this one as someone who hasn't participated in research, kind of get a different view about it.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of different types of research here at BC. One of my best friends is currently working on some education research with a professor of hers, just one-on-one. It's the two of them work on a research project, and they were supposed to go to a conference and present that this April, which unfortunately they aren't able to do anymore, but they're putting it together in another way. Also, though, on a more personal note, I like to throw out the anecdote of one day I was just walking through one of our academic buildings, and my organic chemistry professor, who I had known for about 2 or 3 weeks, didn't even know she knew my name. She stopped me as I'm walking through the atrium and goes, "Hey, Danielle." So first of all, I'm caught off guard because I didn't know she knew my name. And second of all, she started a conversation with me about whether or not I'd be interested in doing research. A lot of the professors here do research in their specific subject matter. And though I wasn't interested in doing organic chemistry research, I told her, well, maybe biology research or something like that. And she actually offered to connect me with a biology professor who was doing research, who she knew pretty well. I didn't end up taking that offer, but just to show you how abundant the research opportunities are at BC, that they kind of sometimes come jumping out of the woodwork at you when you least expect it. That was a really cool opportunity that I had that I wanted to share with all of you.
That's great. Great story. How about Laura, Shayna?
Yeah, I can go first. So I think I have both sides to it too, because I've done research at BC in the biology department. I was in a cancer biology lab, which is really cool because you kind of can work that into your academic schedule about what times you can make being in the lab. It's a great opportunity to meet other students as well, because a lot of the labs have a good amount of undergraduates and graduate students. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that BC is super close to one of the best medical hubs in the world. So early on in my freshman year, I actually learned about an internship through Harvard Cancer Center and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So I applied to that, and I actually was accepted, and it was a 2-year program where I did full-time research in the cancer biology departments there. And so that has been an amazing opportunity, you know, getting to go to national conferences to present my research, collaborating with other professionals. And I think the Career Center at BC was a pivotal aspect of me getting that opportunity and kind of working me through the process of gaining an internship like that. And it's something that's going to carry on once I leave my time at BC and like start applying for jobs. So I think that whole research aspect, having that the Boston area to utilize as well. I can actually make it there on a normal school day because it's only 15 minutes by the T. And so knowing that that's super accessible during the academic year as well was something that really drew me to BC.
Great, great.
And then to kind of speak to the non-biochem research, because I'm a neuroscience major, and I knew I wanted to get involved in a psychology or neuroscience lab starting fall semester. So over summer, I just literally Googled psychology labs at BC. I found one that was doing interesting research that I found interesting, and they had a Google form to fill out for new research assistants. So I filled it out. One of the postdoctorate fellows who works in the lab reached out to me. We talked over Google Hangout, and he said, I'd love to have you help out with the lab. And that, I actually, to answer one of the questions that I see here too, so I actually came in as PreMed. was kind of on the fence about it freshman year. I knew I was still hesitant, but I was like, okay, let me do the prereqs and then I can make a decision later down the road. But doing research was actually one of the main reasons that I said, I find this so much more interesting than the prospect of going to med school or being a doctor. And this summer, well, I'm supposed to be doing my senior thesis at BC. We'll see if that happens. But this upcoming year, I'm going to be doing my senior thesis. So research is one of the main reasons I switched. And in terms of finding myself in the minority, the science majors are kind of a mix, I would say. A lot of the psychology ones, at least, a lot of us are planning to go to grad school or are getting our masters. Biology too, I know people getting their masters or wanting to go to grad school. So I would say it's kind of a mix. I never felt like I'm surrounded by pre-med students at any point. Just because I came in as pre-med, a lot of my friends just tend to be pre-med now. But I definitely have a mix, and I would not say I felt any like me being the only one or anything like that as a science major.
That's a great answer, but I still need to ask about pre-med, because there are some people that want to go to medical school, and people probably want to know about how that program works and advising, and what are the things that a student who is going to be in pre-med at BC works with, what resources are available. So if you guys can talk about that, other than Shayna, who has made a very educated choice to go in a different direction.
I could start this one off if you'd like. So pre-med at BC isn't a defined major. Pre-med is a set of classes that we have a pre-med committee here, which is a set of advisors that if you're in the pre-med program, which anybody can be in, you have access to. So I think that answers one of the questions in the chat, that yes, there are specific pre-med advisors. But basically, it's a year of English, a year of chemistry with lab, a year of organic chemistry with lab, and a year of physics with lab. And they don't just pull those recommended classes out of a hat. It's basically kind of like a blanket that covers most medical schools in the US is their prereq classes that they require everybody come to before matriculating. So you can be an English major and be pre-med, because like 5 classes is pretty flexible to fit into 8 semesters here. And then as far as that goes, the way that like even though that I completed the pre-med program, but I'm no longer, I guess, in the process of applying to medical school because I've chosen to do something else, is that, the way that the application process works is once you complete those prerequisite classes, you start to go through what BC would call the committee process. And so the way that works is that, you put together all of your application materials in terms of, your grades in your pre-med classes, your letters of recommendation, your MCAT testing score. And so the pre-med committee basically writes you a letter that recommends you to medical schools. And what's really great about that is that they kind of contextualize your education here at BC. So for example, they might say, he might not have the highest GPA out of everybody from BC that's applying, but he took the absolute hardest classes that were available to him, and he participated in X, Y, and Z clubs, and he worked a part-time job, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that element of BC's pre-med committee is really fantastic, is because they provide more of a holistic view on you as an applicant when you go to med school. And from that, the students who do participate in the BC committee process place really well at med schools.
That's a pretty thorough. Danielle, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a little snippet after what Jake said. As somebody who's currently going through the application process, I also just wanted to note the importance of having advisors who have been your professors or research. I'm forgetting the name because I don't participate in research, but the head of your research lab or anything like that, because those personal connections that you have to professors, which are abundant at BC if you make the effort, and it's pretty minimal effort because they want to get to know you. But those professional and personal relationships that you can have with those professors and other faculty come in really handy. For example, I have 2 advisors, my organic chemistry professor, Professor Holly Deek, and I know Jake also knows Professor Danielle Tagan, who happens to also be the head of the pre-med committee. She's a professor as well, and they have been really helpful in guiding my process, specifically of what schools I'm interested in applying to, editing my personal statement, which is kind of like a Common App essay for those of you who have just gone through the process of applying to college, things like that, that are really helpful on a more personal level in your application process as an applicant, rather than just overall, the side of med schools looking in at your application. They kind of help on both ends of that.
How about the MCAT? Did you go through any course on campus? Are there resources on campus for the MCAT, or are you expected to do that off campus?
Yeah, so I'm also I actually just had my last class for a Kaplan-based MCAT prep course. And for those of you who don't recognize the acronym, MCAT is the medical college admission test, just like the SAT or the ACT for college. Luckily at BC, we have Kaplan-sponsored courses that run, I believe, every semester on campus. For us, they finished on Zoom, but nonetheless, they're available and they're accessible to students at BC at a pretty significant discount to the regular rate. They've been really helpful in preparing to take the MCAT, though my test date just got canceled. So we're waiting on that new development.
You guys all have a focus in sciences, but that's not all BC students do. You can't just come and take 40 courses in neuroscience, in biology, in biochemistry. There's the core curriculum. Danielle, you're a philosophy double major, and all of you have these interests in other things. It's our hope that it's these other courses that either we influence you to take or require you to take that make you a better scientist, that make you a better researcher, make you a better gatherer of information. Is that true? Have those other courses helped you as a scientist or helped you as a student? Have you enjoyed those? Or are they really annoying because all you want to do is study science?
I personally think that, as far as being a successful scientist, one of the most important skills to have in addition to your research skills are being able to communicate really well. And so that comes in terms of oral expression and being able to write. And so I think, BC's core education in terms on the humanities side of both English and history, where, you have to get up and speak in front of the classes and present on a topic. It's like those types of skills that you practice that, might not necessarily be emphasized in your biology, chemistry, and physics classes, but are still really important to being a good scientist. So I think on that frontier, having the liberal arts as well as a STEM education is important.
I'd love to answer this question because it involves one of my favorite anecdotes about my application process to BC. So my information session looked a little bit different from this, but I was sitting in Gasson Hall, which hopefully each and every one of you get to sit in someday. And I remember hearing from a panel of students, somebody talking about the core curriculum. They started talking about how we had to have philosophy and theology core requirements. And I remember distinctly turning to my mom and saying, we can go now. But here I am, a philosophy double major, so let's back up a little bit and fill in the gap. I took my first philosophy class freshman year. It was my core curriculum, and I really, though I didn't necessarily like the topic that we were focused on a lot of medieval, ancient philosophy. I really found a liking in describing different viewpoints on the same topic, of kind of discovering what it is that's important to, for example, morals or an ethical consideration, and kind of forming my own viewpoint on something that was a more complex topic than, for example, in a science when you take something to be fact once it's proven from a theory. So I found that really valuable in my own personal formation and educational formation to be able to describe my views more in depth rather than, just that focus that I would have maybe gotten at a school that doesn't have a core curriculum of just, okay, I'm going to learn all of the science that there is to know as a biology major and maybe not find philosophy at all, or public health for that matter, because I found it through philosophy.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, one of my favorite classes I've taken so far was actually a class that's a part of a minor at BC offered called Medical Humanities. And it was an English-based class. So we looked a lot of novels depicting illness in a different way and more about the human experience. And that's something that you hear about a lot with medical schools specifically, is that you can have a student applying that can tell you the name and the origin of every disease, but when they're interacting with the patient, if they can't get that information out of them, then it's no use. And so one thing that our professor did, which he actually brought in someone from the Boston University theater department who works with the BU medical school students to do some sort of theater activities, just some things to warm up. And it's a lot harder than you think. Being able to meet someone and come up with, innovative ways to get that information out of them in a different way that you would never expect is difficult. And being able to have that experience early on and kind of acknowledge that this is something that the medical field needs in the future was something that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. And so that's part of the core curriculum, being able to look at these, maybe STEM issues in a completely different light and in the lens of philosophy or from different religions, and how that interplays into medicine as well is really important.
There's a question on the queue that maybe this has come into play for you guys, but we talked about how academics are leading you to a path and are supporting you in what your plan might be after graduation. But talk about clubs, talk about organizations, talk about, retreats, campus ministry, the things that are also at BC. How have those things continued to support your plan for the future? Maybe there's a direct connection, but maybe it's a more indirect connection that you're heading down the right path and maybe you're getting some ideas on what you want to do after graduation.
I'd love to grab this one because I see a specific question in the comments or in the Q&A about BC EMS, and that's for all of you who don't know the acronym EMS, that's for Emergency Medical Services. I'm assuming that's because I'm wearing my sweatshirt, but I just wanted to note that it's really important that I joined before I even knew what the process was like to become an EMT, an emergency medical technician. I'm really fortunate to have learned all of what I've learned about EMS through mentors and peers who are going through the same volunteering as myself. And one of the things that I really love about BC is the way that our students engage in service. So I want to say the stat is 85% of our student body participates in volunteering in some capacity during their time at BC, and there's no requirement for service whatsoever. So BC EMS was just my way of kind of dipping my toe into that service here at BC, and it's become one of my biggest involvements. Specifically, the application is a little different if you're coming in as an EMT versus if you're not, but it involves a written application and a practical skill evaluation. The practical skill evaluation, if you're not an EMT already, is just a CPR practical, so you do need to be CPR certified. But other than that, it would be your typical practical skill evaluation that you did to become an EMT. So that's kind of to answer that specific question. But I would say that being engaged in clubs at BC, and maybe some of you guys could also talk about this, kind of replaces Greek life in a way, because we don't have Greek life here at BC. That was the way that I met a lot of my upperclassmen mentors, had questions about what social life is at BC, and kind of really made my social life grow was by joining clubs and meeting people through that. And met some of my best friends through different clubs that I'm in at BC.
Yeah, I'd love to echo what Danielle had just said, and I also see, to kind of address one of the questions in the chat about, the 11 and 12 of us in the honors chemistry program, we ended up being like really close together. I know, what everybody's up to and what everyone's doing. We see each other around campus, and, we suffered together through the honors chemistry program. So that was kind of a bonding experience. But also, one of the ways that I made a whole lot of my friends who weren't in my class, they were a year or two ahead of me, was through clubs. I also did a volunteering club. I did the student admissions program, which is basically this platform of me being here today, giving you guys this panel. And so that these clubs have students from all the grades. And, typically if you're a freshman, you might not normally encounter seniors and juniors in your classes. So it's just a really great way to expand your social circle and meet new people.
And to kind of go off, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Shayna. Go ahead. We got time.
I was going to say, to kind of just go off of that, what I like about the social life, specifically the clubs at BC, it's how it's that blend of an academic resource and like pre-professional programs, but then it's also that social aspect where you're meeting your friends. For me, like my social aspect is a cultural club, but then on the other side, I'm in a psychology honors honor society. So it's kind of just that mix where you get the best of both worlds.
Question on the queue is also about the new science and STEM initiative that will begin in about a year, and that's the Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society. Whether that's going to be any part of your life or not at Boston College, what do you think about it in terms of where Boston College is and how it's committed to the science? And if you've learned anything about it, why should that be something people who are interested in the sciences at BC should be excited about it?
Yeah, so I know Danielle and I both have the minor of the Global Public Health and the Common Good, which is actually through the Schiller Institute. So just knowing that even though the Institute isn't completely finished yet, that those resources are still available to students has definitely been reassuring for me. And I think the cool thing about this topic is that it kind of intertwines a bunch of different disciplines. So at BC, we also have the Lynch School of Education and Human Development, the Cannell School of Nursing, and then obviously Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences on top of our business school. But knowing that those other 3 programs are kind of collaborating to come together with this public health minor. So I have a class taught by, or co-taught by a professor in the nursing school, as well as someone in the Lynch School. So just kind of getting those different perspectives on it. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in the idea that biology and chemistry and anything in STEM is hard facts, but knowing that there's also people behind that and knowing that there is a need to address that, especially in such a collaborative environment. That's kind of what the Schiller Institute is standing for. It wants to do top tier research and education, of course, especially in STEM, but also kind of looking at these problems through a different light and making sure that we're integrating that into life at BC. So just that minor is obviously already available, and there's going to be a lot more programs kind of come to fruition through that.
I also think the main goal of the Schiller Institute and engineering at BC is to incorporate the liberal arts and our core curriculum with that mission. I remember when we attended a student admission event, one of the main things they told us about the Schiller Institute was that the main goal was to fix problems and think about that through a BC lens and how to solve problems. Like that was the main goal. And I think the core curriculum can tie into that because you can't study science without studying philosophy and theology. In my philosophy class, we're discussing bioethics and really controversial things that in today's rapidly technologically advancing world, these are questions that we need to address. So I think the Schiller Institute ties the hard science component with those questions and trying to figure out these complex problems.
Those are both good answers that I'm totally stealing and using in my information sessions going forward. Well done. Thank you for that content. We talked a little bit about friends, the alleged friends that you've accumulated over the years, because the dirty little secret about studying the sciences with the extra lab work and these study sessions and some of the time you have more time in class, more time in lab than maybe other majors and other students do. So to be able to balance that with alleged friendships, intramural sports, extracurricular activities, having fun with your friends, it's a little bit of a tougher balance. Have you found it to be tougher than either other students? Was it a learned and acquired skill to balance some of the other extra things that you have to do, even pre-med or research with some of the other things that normal Boston College students do in terms of social life, sporting events, things like that?
I would give that just like a flat yes. I personally think that, being a lab science major definitely takes up a little bit more of your time. And, you just have to work a little bit harder to create that balance of school and social life, because if you think about it, everybody's getting about the same amount of credits, but while I'm sitting in an organic chemistry lab for 5 hours while my friends are getting their homework done for the day, then I get out of lab and I gotta get my homework done. And if I want to see my roommates at night, like getting back from the library before people go to bed, I miss my roommates a lot. I wish I were on campus, but it is kind of a balancing act that you just have to, I think, manage your time a little bit more efficiently to get it all done.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I would agree with that. And for anybody who's attended another info session or knows anyone who's been a freshman at BC, I think living on Newton helped me to get that time management skill under my belt. Newton campus, for those of you who don't know, is one of our freshman living communities at BC. There's 2 of them. Newton campus is about a mile off of our main campus, and there's a bus that runs quite often back and forth. So I won't get into it, but I have to say that the labs and the Newton bus and everything considered, there's still time. There's plenty of time in the day to do everything that you want to do if you structure your day in a really intentional way and get used to being in a routine. Because once you get that routine down, that's probably one of the hardest parts of freshman year, but once you get that routine down, it's all possible to fit in. So you just have to get good at prioritizing everything and making time for what's important.
And I think going off of what Jake said as well, I was also a part of the honors chemistry program, just a different year. And, as horrible as it sounds, there's nothing that brings people together than suffering through class together. So when I was going through organic chemistry, knowing that those other 15 people around me were struggling as well kind of brought us together in a way that, other majors might not experience. And so I think it is possible, of course, to make friends outside of your STEM major, but I think what makes STEM so special is the way that you form a bond with these students. I had a class with some people freshman year that we might have only had one bio class together, but we still talk to each other when we see each other on campus. You always have that bond that brings you back together to that one class that you struggled through. And so I think that's another way that you kind of create friendships on campus through the STEM major itself.
As we wrap up here, and this has been really helpful and interesting, and the people that are watching us or will watch us in the future, many of them will come to Boston College, and we're thrilled that they'll be part of the class of 2024. So as we wrap up, give them a piece of advice, a decision you made that was helpful, a tip on getting through freshman year, a tip on living through the struggle. Laura, let's go around the circle here and give one piece of advice for life as a science major, life in pre-med, life in neuroscience as a researcher. Give them a little piece of advice that they can carry with them to get through their time at Boston College. We'll go in the reverse. So we'll start with Shayna and go that direction.
So I guess at this point in your decision-making process, I would say do not stress. Everything will work out and you will truly end up where you are meant to be. I know at the time it can often feel like you are going crazy and you don't know where your next 4 years are going to be, but everything will be fine. And then for freshman year in college in general, kind of echoing the same tones, don't stress. Freshman year is a learning curve, but just take the time to adjust, explore. Making friends is not as hard or daunting as it seems, and you'll find your group, especially at a college like BC. But again, do not stress, do not worry. Everything has a reason and you will be fine.
Heavy stuff. I like it, Shayna. Laura?
I would say coming into BC or whichever university you choose, the best advice I can give is to kind of leave those preconceived notions about what you want your college experience to be behind you. I think when I had all these expectations of the clubs I automatically wanted to join and the types of people I wanted to hang out with, it just added on this layer of stress if anything deviated from that. And so once I was able to kind of leave that all behind and realize that, like, here I am at BC with all these opportunities, and no matter what path I choose, I'm going to end up, we have the motto men and women for others. Like, I am going to end up being a well-educated person who can go out and change the world no matter what. And so making sure that you kind of leave behind that idea of you need to have everything planned out. Like, it's okay to not know. A lot of people come in undecided, and that's okay. You're going to find out it could be one small class or one small interaction that you have with someone to kind of set your entire path into motion. And so that's kind of like the advice that I would give you guys.
Outstanding. Jake.
Yeah, sure. That was a kind of, I'm going to echo that a little bit. It's just, if you're anything like me, you probably had your next 5 years of your life like planned out. You knew exactly how it was going to go. But like my plan that I had for myself 5 years ago has gone awry in like all the best possible ways. And, I think it's important to just roll with it and know that this is a time to push you out of your comfort zone and to grow as a person, trying a bunch of new different things. And that's what college is all about.
Getting pushed out of your comfort zone, knowing that a bunch of us are there to help you if you fall, right?
Absolutely. And you do at a school like BC, there's like a really strong community and support system to help pick you up and push you along the way. So
good stuff. This is great advice. Danielle, don't let me down.
I won't. But first, I just want to apologize to anybody whose questions we didn't get to. Feel free to email us after the session. If you have any questions, we'll show you our emails.
And that's my job, Danielle, but go ahead.
I know, but I feel so bad. There's questions left. Okay. So, so my advice to you, I kind of said it earlier, but it's make connections while you're here. Don't underestimate the power of getting to know a professor. Professors have been a really big part of who I am here at BC, who I've gotten to be through different opportunities, different advising that I've gotten from professors, both personally and academically, as well as upperclassmen. Upperclassmen have, played a really big role in the different opportunities that I've applied for or taken here at BC, just because they've been through it. They know how to support you in the ways that Shayna's trying to support you right here virtually. Asking people who are the good professors to take, who are, the ones who are going to push me and make me a better student, a better person, and what are the classes that are maybe not on my radar that I should be thinking about. One of those classes that I took was a really interdisciplinary class in the Pulse department, which is a service learning department here at BC. Really changed my perspective on a lot of things. So definitely echoing some of the things that my fellow panelists here have said, but broaden your horizons and really make those connections while you're here.
Well, I mean, look at that wisdom that you just left everyone with. That's all four of you, very impressive. You guys really crushed it. And guys, this has been the most normal part of my day, talking to you about life at home. And whether you come back to us for graduation in October, or you're going to see us in the summer or in the fall, I can't wait to see you guys back on campus. Thank you so much for your time tonight. For those that are viewing us, thank you for another installment of our Student Admissions Program panel. We have more panels coming up throughout the month of April. Any help that we can offer, we'd love to do it. So for the people viewing, thanks a lot. Have a good night. And to my friends, thank you so much. Miss you all. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.